After a crowded couple of weeks, after a crowded 20 years, right now it's just me and Mike Ryan in a room talking intimately, not the normal show. And I want to reveal some things I have not revealed and talk about some things that I have not talked about. And the impetus for it is seeing a story this week that I'm guessing not a lot of people pay attention to, not a lot of people care about. Marvin Jones Jr. steps away from the team to tend to personal family matters. And he puts on Instagram something in black and white, something poignant, something artful of him bowing his head, it looks like during the anthem, and saying goodbye to his team and Detroit. And he writes, I just want to say that I have so much love and respect for the Ford family, the city of Detroit, my teammates and coaches. To be brief, I'm stepping away from the team to take care of personal family matters. Although this was no easy decision, I cannot be the player that I need to be for this team, as well as tend to my family from afar. This organization has been amazing, showing love and support for myself and my family over the years, and this time is no different. For that, I'm appreciative. To my brothers and coaches, I will be rooting for you every step of the way. This is the year. Go get it. Love and respect to all. Marvin Jones Jr.
That's a nice statement.
An hour later, the Lions waived him.
Well, shouldn't they?
Yes, but he needs to step away for a moment during a football season that cannot wait for him to step away for a moment. Maybe he needs weeks, maybe he needs months, but right now he cannot do his job, a very difficult job, and have the life balance that he needs.
I'm sure this was all discussed between the organization.
But I'm also sure that it's an enormous decision that's hard to make. He's 33 years old. This probably ends his earning, his ability to earn. The bearing and the grieving of who this person used to be. Now, maybe he's got career ahead of him, but he has to go tend to family matters, and they will convince you in that military school that the family that matters is the one in your huddle. You have to be there for them, and he's had to make a choice. He's got to make a choice. Be a part. Keep in mind, Mike, the Lions have been bad, worse than anybody in football for 40 years. They made both of their best players quit. That's their legacy.
Yeah.
Their third best player had to go somewhere else to win a championship. He has been giving his body to this cause and this team, and this is the best team he's ever played on, and it's probably the best Detroit team that we've ever seen.
Yeah. Have you watched Marvin Jones this year?
He hasn't been very good.
He was awful. He was awful in that opening game of the season where Kadarius Toney he was the fast twitch energy drink player of the week that week, and he made Marvin Jones's life a lot easier because Marvin Jones was atrocious in that football game. And in seeing that statement, the first thing that ran through my mind was him saying, I can't be the player that this team needs me to be right now with what's going on in my life. And a lot of that made sense because Marvin Jones, at the age of 33, he's had a very nice career. Very nice career in the NFL. At a receiver at that position, it's hard to get to the age of 33 in the NFL. And if you watched him this season, he very clearly fell off. Waiving him was probably something that was going to happen anyways, especially when you look at that receiving core.
I'm not blaming the Lions for waiving him. My guess is it's something of a mutual decision.
Yeah.
My guess is it's one of the hardest decisions Marvin Jones has ever had to make.
Let me be clear. I have a fair amount of empathy for whatever it is he's going through. It seems like it's serious, but all I've known from Marvin Jones this football season is he has not been a contributor.
But I want to talk about some of the humanizing parts of this and where it is that he reached me when you said he hasn't been the player that he was. Because
33.
It's impossible to be, but also when you have this other stuff going on, this is where it reached me given what my last couple of years have been like. Marvin Jones has had 2 or 3 seasons that are either close to 1,000 yards, around 1,000 yards, but he's making a decision that his family has to be the priority. We talk all the time about, and they tell you in football that it's, family and faith and then football, but that ain't the order.
Yeah. Is there a bereavement list that players can be put on? It seemed as though that was a retirement statement, not I'd like to come back at some point this season statement. And if so, I understand from a cap perspective why this move was made.
I don't think the audience necessarily knows when he writes the sentence, this was not an easy decision, how much goes into he is the economy around him, he is the place where money gets made, and now future earnings he's got to make the choice. As soon as I leave, it's the possibility I won't get back to that level.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it was. Again, I want to be very clear. I have empathy for Marvin Jones, but if you watch him this season, future earnings were not really there for the young man. They weren't. Like it's. I understand that this conversation would be different if it were Marvin Jones of 3 years ago.
All I'm doing in setting all of this up is to talk specifically about what my last couple of years have been like in a way that I have not been able to talk about it, because the doing of this has become more difficult because of the things that I'm about to tell you, which I have not, never mind, shared with the audience. I haven't shared some of these details with you or the people closest to me either, because of what must be in play when you're saying, I have to go be with my family now. Of course, this is happening because he's diminished, and of course, he's being waived because the Lions can waive him. They'd put him on a bereavement list if he were better.
Yeah, to be fair, we don't know what's going on with his family. It seems pretty serious enough for that statement to go out there. And I don't think it's fair to assume, if people in our audience are doing this, that this wouldn't be a statement that would be put out at the peak of his career too.
The leave of absence when you have to work.
Yeah.
The leave of absence when you need to get your head right and you need to say that your family is the priority, but sometimes you cannot leave because it will affect too many of your other responsibilities that way. Under other circumstances, if I were not running this company and this company was not in need of what we do daily, that does not stop, that is an endless grind,
Right.
I would have, at this point, gone away for a long time. One of the reasons I admire Jon Stewart and am so upset by what happened with Jon Stewart and Apple is Jon Stewart, at this point in his life, doesn't have any reason to care about making something good the way you have to, 80 hours a week, to make that show as good as it was. The only reason to do it is because of how much he cares, because you do it because it's important that you grow and use the platform correctly and keep being somebody who...
Are we talking about an external pressure that's being put on you or an internal one? Because you're a co-founder in the company and you have the support of the company very clearly to take all the time that you need.
Yes, but I don't feel like what we do, that everyone can be led to care the way that we need them to care, unless they are also seeing that I care the same way, that I am not mailing in this thing that is for all of us, meant for all of us. But let me just get to the portion that I have not told you about and where the difficulties reside in doing some of this stuff. When the umbrella is personal family matters. Whatever it is that Kyle Lowry has been going through for 2 years, whatever Tom Brady is talking about when he says, I'm 45, happens, life happens, and unexpected things in life that you had no way of knowing how to handle. So the last 2 years of this and my performance and my confidence and why we're in Hollywood right now, trying to get a different feeling for me with the doing of some of this, as I am in a great deal of pain and grieving now, hurting more than I have over the last 2 years because my brother's gone. But what was in my 2 years that I'm going to explain to you in the audience now that is some of the mental health conversation that doesn't get touched about, even though we're talking about mental health more than we ever have. And even though it feels like everyone's getting bombarded all over every day with anxieties that don't have a lot of precedent.
Yeah.
My brother had a cancer in his brain that, undiagnosed for a long time, was making his behavior erratic, where you saw that he was there a lot of the time, but sometimes some stuff couldn't be placed, and this is before we knew that there was cancer in his brain. And so I'm doing things like chasing him at 2:00 in the morning through the streets of Miami Beach, trying to keep an eye on him to make sure that he's not a danger to himself or to others. And a couple of different times, I had to have him, in a way that damaged our relationship, I had to have him Baker acted because I thought he was a threat that he might end up in a situation that wasn't him, that just wasn't his behavior. And one of those times, we're breaking into his house when he is not there to remove the weaponry because the police are going to have to go in, and we don't want him to pick up something. They're warning us. The police are warning us that if they go in, that things can go wrong during this. So I've got that happening over there. And also, at the same time, and I'm hesitant to talk about this because I haven't told my father that I'm going to talk about it. But during this, my father was on a medicine that was also making him behave strangely. And I was headed to go pick him up, to take him to a psychiatrist. And I get a call from my mother that they are at the hospital, that the paramedics, that the firefighters found a 78-year-old man hanging from a balcony, an 8th floor balcony, that if they hadn't helped him then, I would have been pulling up to go help my father. And he would have been on the pavement.
All this is within the last few years.
Yeah, and I'm
as your work life is
yeah
dissolving.
Right. Well, yeah, as it feels like everything's falling apart. Necessarily, but so.
You know, you didn't need Marvin Jones as the on-ramp.
But it's what made me think about it today, and it's what made me think about, because I haven't. Thank you. It feels like South Beach sessions. You handing me the tissues.
I'm bad with all of this, by the way.
Yeah, I know you're the worst person in my entire world to be discussing this.
I'm terrible with this.
But
and
I wanted to explain to the audience why I'm doing this, why we're coming to Hollywood and meeting with these creative people so that we can build something that is different and that satisfies us creatively and that honors all the things that my parents were trying to build of a life for me here. As I come with my wife, I don't have kids. This is the family that we've raised around here. And we're trying
you do have kids. You do have kids, and I think that's why you were working through it. You have a big family. You have Stugotz is your child. I'm your child. Billy, and now your children have children. And you felt the immense pressure to keep going into work, but also part of that is work was an escape. The creative outlet brought you peace at times, and it also sometimes, depending on how shows went, compounded what was going on at home.
But also hard to do well under those circumstances.
Yeah.
The reason that the entree was Marvin Jones is because I identified with the struggle of, like, what do I do? What do you do when you have all of these people you care about and a responsibility to all of them?
It falls all on you. And a lot of that stuff I knew you were going through at the time. You would try to open up to me, and again, I'm very bad at this. And I kind of felt what was needed was just to be your fun house, the fun sandbox, and also just push this thing forward. And I think that there was a realization, I hope, with our audience, as hosts are also entitled to age with grace, and we know that we've been around for a very long time. I do think that there was and I hope you felt it, a huge amount of support and understanding when you delivered the news about your brother over the air, which, by the way, I'd known that we were close, but I discovered, truthfully, that your brother had passed on from you on the air. I think that a lot started to make sense for the listener. And my hope as a producer of this show for however long I'm sitting in this chair is you went through some stuff that will change you forever. And on top of that, you're older. You're a different person than you were. We're all very different than we were when we were at ESPN. We're better in some respects. We're worse in others through whatever prism you may view that. Let's just say the Reddit prism is what I'm using.
But I had to check out, because of what my last 2 years are, I've always found criticism hugely constructive, hugely helpful. Our audience, our audience knows what's good, and when we're not meeting that standard, but all of that has gotten so cruel, and because I'm in a diminished confidence state, because my temperament isn't right day to day to do this, I have had to totally check out on criticism that used to be helpful just because it was hurting me for the first time.
Same, and I think what was going on there with me is the same thing that was going on with you, is that years ago, the criticism would not get to me as much because I was way more confident in what I was doing and that I knew better. Now, I still feel that way to a degree because I'm a narcissist.
Well, but I've never lacked confidence doing this, and the last couple of years is the first time that's happened.
But I think it's understandable.
I mean, it's understandable if you're me. It's not understandable if you're listening to this and you want the show to be exactly what it's always been, and here your host is falling apart and doesn't know if he should even be at work, doesn't know if he should be with his wife taking care, just an avalanche of things arrive that there's no handbook for.
Yeah, and with that came the realization that the show has to evolve, because if you've listened to the show over the course of the 20 years that we've been doing it, the show has reinvented itself. From before Hawk to during Hawk to after Hawk, from when Hawk put his name in the title to ESPN and video integration to the pirate phase to where we are now, which is a unique position for us as we've partnered up with another startup company, and in many respects, some of our startup growing pains compounded one another, and we've struggled. I know I have, with the lack of visibility, because there's a value in just being on mute on a television as you're walking
in an airport.
There is a value, and I do find myself getting jealous, and I do find myself consuming perceived competitors and looking at rankings and seeing where there's a dip there, and looking at some metrics and saying, oh, there's a dip there. What can we do? What can we do about it? And
this has knocked out some of the last couple of years has knocked out wherever it is that I was competitive on this stuff. I really have gotten to a peaceful place. Yeah, I know you're not there, but I've gotten to a peaceful place on the idea of success is being able to do it hard stop, being able to do it well, being able to do it happily. But in this climate where all the seats are disappearing, and we are uniquely positioned to have a very good opportunity to be able to do this ourselves for a long time. And that, to me, I've learned it later in life that where I was competitive it doesn't serve me anymore.
Right. I think for most of our show's history, we were always a scrappy underdog, and then after we got the DraftKings deal, is like, okay, well, we won. How do we do this now that we've won? And yet we still had obstacles that we had to figure out how to navigate. But now the obstacle is, as we've all gotten older, as we've all changed, as we all have had these heartbreaking life experiences, is where do we go from here? And the answer for the last month has been Los Angeles. And your brother spiritually wanted you to be out here. Part of the reshaping of our show is these partnerships and these people, these mentors. The company has mentorship programs with Mike Schur and Adam McKay, and realizing that we don't have all the answers, and realizing that we want to be that cutting edge creative show. Look, I've noticed where we've dipped in certain places. I've seen creative things systematically get stripped away from the show, as the main thing has just been pushing out this content and just being replaced by dudes. Thankfully, fewer dudes and more women than most of the people in the sports media landscape, but still, generally, dudes talking into microphones. And I look at the lay of the land, and I see part of my take is dudes talking into microphones, and they're younger, and they have a unicorn talent over there, and they're really damn good. And a couple of years ago, I used to be like, yeah, we can go toe-to-toe, but I realize we have to be different. Pat McAfee, charismatic dude, really energetic, really fun. That's dudes talking into microphones, and he's doing it on the platform, an even bigger platform than ESPN afforded us. So where do we win? We win by being creative. But it's hard to be creative, especially for you when you're dealing with everything that you were dealing with. And I think I speak for the audience. And so many times, be it a Moss or even at the airport, someone came up to me, or I just saw a video of Lucy at USC, and one of the students at the tailgate was thanking you for just being there for them. And I think that resonates even more now with how honest you've been with the audience, in that you were being there for them when you desperately needed someone being there for you. Thankfully, you had your wife, you had this show, but I don't think anybody could really step up to the level that was required given what you just shared.
I will say to that audience that one of the reasons South Beach Sessions is going to get better and more vulnerable, and we're going to be coming out here to make sure that property has the voice in it and the platform that it needs to talk most honestly with people. But even though it has been noisy and a confidence test for 2 years, to see and hear the audience notice with some anger that the show isn't what they've wanted it to be, and maybe not these last 2 weeks either, because I know anytime
it's a different show.
Anytime we throw change and unrest, it gets it's such an intimate medium. We're friends in your head. We're dragging a lot of people through bad work, bad jobs, where we're half of they want the show, they expect the show to be a certain thing.
Yeah, the LA shows kind of feel like they've turned into like a poorly dressed sports reporters.
The most poorly dressed, and also the proportion here that makes a little person.
Yeah, I'm not so happy with this, where you look so much smaller. I know you've lost some grief
weight. Contract. It's why Mike Schur and Adam McKay are such great mentors. They're like, with lighting and everything, you can make it so that somebody
I tower over you in some of these videos.
Brad Williams, a little person, looks bigger than I am in some of these videos. But our audience, and Mike, this is what I will tell you, and I've said this before, and I don't mean it to be too syrupy, but I do believe that as an authentic, different media thing in this competitive media landscape, the thing that we have that no one else has, is that the people whose loyalty is tested, even with the battering the show has taken over the last 2 years, their loyalty, because they ride with us from there, we know what this thing is about, what it tries to be, what it is efforting to be, and it's an honest version of itself. The loyalty is, at least in part, because they believe that they know what this thing is, and they expect this thing to not disappoint them, wherever it is, on issues of the day, on how strong the product is, on they expect us not to mail it in and go Hollywood and stop caring. And I'm here to assure you, the reason that I'm sharing this with the audience right now, through the unrest of what I imagine, Mike, I imagine that our show is being met very poorly. I don't know this over the last 2 weeks, but just with the experience that I have of people generally don't like change unless it's immediately good. And change doesn't tend to be immediately good. It takes a minute. The loyalty of our audience has buoyed me there, because I think it's unusual the amount of times we get from the people listening to this right now who say, thank you for dragging me through that bad time in a way that brought me something that felt less bad. I will say that the job has done that for me, even at times when I've been thinking, I need to step away from this for a while. I need to go take care of some things.
And I still think you should. I still think that you should, but I share the same concerns that if you step away, like what becomes of us? But the criticisms from the audience, while they're more than I'm used to, while I take them more personally than I ever have because of my own lack of confidence, it's still a driving force in realizing, no, this is an acknowledgement. Some of your criticisms are true. The show isn't what it once was, and quite frankly, I don't know if it'll ever be that again. And the pressure that I personally feel as someone that found themselves back in the EP slot, and during the course of the finals, I was kind of like half in, 1 foot in, 1 foot in my other responsibilities for Meadowlark. And while you were away, I was just looking at metrics and realizing, like, okay, this is quantifiable. The lack of confidence in what it is that we're doing, because sometimes I don't know if something's good while I'm making it. Sometimes I do. And
I generally tend to know. I generally tend to feel like if it meets our standard, it's probably pretty good.
How's this going?
I think it's honest.
It is honest. And hopefully the audience takes it to heart, seeks it out. And hopefully this serves as an explanation as to why maybe some of those doubts about us have crept in over the last few years. And we're giving voice to it, that some of them are true, but we're trying to reshape what it is that we're doing, and once again reinvent ourselves in the face of challenges that we've never had to before. And trust me, leaving ESPN, doing a show the very next day with a company that I had to alert, hey, well, how do we have internet? That was pretty challenging. We've always found a way to persevere and navigate these difficult spots, but I can readily admit that right now I think that this is as unsettled ground as I've ever been on around this show, because you've been dealing with stuff that is very clearly weighing on you.
It's scary. It's also invigorating, and it's fulfilling when you get the shared laughter with people you care about of having done it well.
Yeah.
I do agree with the original critique, though, that I didn't have to spend 6 minutes talking about Marvin Jones before I got to the poor decision. My judgment's off, Mike. Yeah. My judgment's been off for 2 years.
I was prepared to go Dwight Howard. I'm like, where is this Marvin Jones? Where is this going? And my first reaction, because I had bet on that game, was like, that guy stinks.
Yeah, I noticed. I'm trying to humanize him, and all you're doing is I was trying to figure out whether it cost you money or hurt you in a suicide pool
terrible
or fantasy.
No, I just watched. I was locked in. I'm like, whoa, this guy's bad.
Why is Dan trying to make me feel bad for Marvin Jones's personal family matters when I know he's got 5 catches this year for 35 yards?
I guess the reason why we just had the last 2 segments.
I gotta stop crying on air. Man. I have to stop doing that.
That was reserved for Kugler's shows.
I have to stop doing that.
I know that you're genuinely going through something, and I you know how much I love you, and I value that you love me and the audience, that you're gonna share this in front of. How are the camera guys feeling about all of this?
It's awkward.
It's pretty heavy.
It's awkward. Yeah, they haven't. They must be so confused because we've done a couple of South Beach sessions while we're here, and all they've seen me do is cry. So it's just I'm the crying journalist.
But the ultimate reason why we had the last 2 segments that we just had was I had a plan for today's show, and it was a great segment. That was done with Mike Schur and Dan, and it was about sports fandom and how a team can grab hold of a city, and when you have that beautiful relationship where the team takes on the identity of the city, and the city loves the team, and it's this galvanizing force, and it's an amazing thing, and hooray, sports, this is why we love everything. We taped that last week to air today, and that team and that city was Philadelphia and the Phillies.
I believe we should still air that. No, that's just the reason. I believe after this segment, we should air that just so that people can laugh the way that you've been laughing for a week since we taped this segment. I will tell the audience this. We have no segments in the bank that waited this long. Mike asked me to do something that was evergreen for a week later, and I decided to talk to Mike Schur about one of his favorite subjects, baseball, and I decided to try to get Mike interested in baseball again. And the only thing that got him interested, yes, I succeeded, but the only thing that got you interested in baseball again was the Arizona Diamondbacks did not have a bigger national fan than you rooting for that content to get killed because me and Mike Schur were gas bag know-it-alls about clearly Philadelphia is going to make it to the World Series.
Right. You're not the only gas bag know-it-all in this equation. I was too. And right before that segment, I'm like, make sure this is evergreen. I have it slated for Thursday of next week, and just make sure it's evergreen.
I think we did this after Philadelphia went up 2-0 in that series, and the decibel levels in Philadelphia were being quantified as some of the loudest ever heard in a baseball stadium.
Yeah, and you baseball experts were so certain that the Phillies were making the World Series
that the segment would hold up. For a week.
Yeah, that you didn't heed my warnings. And you just powered on with, when this airs, Philadelphia is going to love its baseball team even more. We're probably downplaying how much Philadelphia loves its baseball team. And me, as someone that doesn't really follow baseball, but knows historically the playoffs are pretty unpredictable, and pretending like you know what's exactly going to happen in that sport seems like a misstep. And to see you guys be so sure that the Phillies would make the World Series,
that the segment would hold up for 7 days.
And it wasn't even about the Diamondbacks or the Phillies anymore. In fact, rooting for the Diamondbacks was counterproductive to what my content strategy is, because
you were rooting against having to do less work.
Yeah, well,
you were rooting.
Trust me. I think I speak for the audience and myself. The Mike that they want to hear from is Mike Schur, and his time is limited as there's no more strike. And we decided to use one of those precious 12.5-minute segments on something that could not air. And I was actively rooting against it because you baseball guys.
All right, let's talk about this part for a second, because baseball has been great this year. I tried to tell you earlier this season, I'm like, Mike, they have fixed it. Baseball is fixed. They've shaved an hour of fat off the sport, and now you can just marvel at the skill levels that you are seeing. And so you tuned in the other day for one of the few times this season. You noticed that Dusty Baker was in one dugout and Bruce Bochy was in the other, and you're like, I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, no,
everything's the same as it was 20 years ago.
Great. On a related note, I've seen the draft results of this Abu Dhabi baseball league that's going on, and it's Pablo Sandoval and Bartolo Colon, and I think I may get whatever extra innings is for Abu Dhabi, because I'm like, I recognize these people. But what ended up happening as this game was going on is I'm going up and down the Sunset Strip to Lemmy's Haunts and the Whiskey A Go-Go, and I'm asking them to put on this baseball game. So
just so that you can laugh at me and Mike Schur, just so that you could root for the Arizona Diamondbacks to take a lead, just so that you can hear this Philadelphia crowd that we were talking about not only turn on their team, but in a silence that showed clear and obvious fear. The decibel levels were really low because they spent many, many innings knowing they were going to turn on the heart of that lineup.
Come Game 6, the best fans in baseball that love this baseball team had left the stadium early.
We're booing.
And Game 7, they always prepare. They grease the light posts for riots in Philadelphia. They were so mad, and they come off so angry, and upset with this baseball team that just a week ago you were so sure was going to make the World Series. I turned on all these CVs down the Sunset Strip, actively rooting against the Philadelphia Phillies, and I recognized one of the pitchers that I was watching was someone that you said is the greatest reliever ever or something like that, unhittable and all this.
That's right, Alvarado.
Yeah, how did he
do?
For
the Phillies. Yes, he gave up 2 hits, a sacrifice fly, a run, and I don't understand how anyone ever gets a hit off of this person.
He's no Paul Quantrill.
Let me explain a couple of things to both you and the audience, okay?
Because you explaining baseball to me has been a winning proposition.
What I'm going to explain to the audience about your joy in all of this is the sport of my youth, the sport that I have loved the most. It is quantifiable and clear at FS1 at ESPN that they've done all of the tech metrics that need to be done on what people want, minute-to-minute viewing habits, and baseball is not being covered, even though you had 2 Game 7s, and I'm telling you, that Astros-Rangers season was amazing. Garcia is like a Cuban player for my lifetime in terms of how much swagger he had and how he controlled that series with 15 RBIs. But baseball is being covered very poorly, and awful announcing showed that on the day after one Game 7 and headed into another Game 7, from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., none of the shows talked about baseball. It was only basketball and football, because basketball and football are the metrics that people care about. And so I've been trying to convert you, someone that I know has this ember flickering somewhere in his heart from 20 years ago, and the only thing that summoned you is being able to turn on a television and laugh at me and Mike Schur were talking about how changed Philadelphia was. You need to run this segment, I think, at this point, just so people can laugh about it. So how changed Philadelphia was, what a great environment it was to have Harper and Castellanos sort of represent the Philadelphia everyman. And then in the 6th inning of Game 6, they're booing, they're leaving by the 7th and 8th inning. And then the funniest thing to happen in that series is all of the interviews of fans leaving the ballpark as they leave the ballpark. the most exciting environment any of us have ever seen in baseball, and they have turned on their team angrily and thankfully not violently, but clearly with a hostility that would get to anger, given how Philadelphia's past is about sports things.
Your bravado and confidence in Philadelphia didn't just exude in that segment, but afterwards, I'm like, yeah, thanks, guys. After we wrap the segment, thanks, guys, because I think they were up like 2-0 at the time, because it's baseball. They can very clearly lose to the Diamondbacks, and you guys doubled and tripled down. Oh, we're these great baseball guys that know everything. We've watched all season. There's no way that is happening. There is none whatsoever.
It's one of the reasons baseball is that great. All of the great teams got knocked out, and instead you have a World Series that everyone is now telling me that no one cares about because both of those teams lost 100-plus games 2 years ago.
Tell that to Rod Barajas. I'm pretty sure he cares.
This is the only joy you got from baseball. You had in Houston.
Yeah, the games weren't very good.
No, wait a minute. The Rangers and the Astros,
I didn't watch that series.
The road team always won.
I didn't see that series.
They won all 7 games.
I saw it like on X. People
you don't know
like,
what I'm talking
Altuve
about with Garcia, Altuve.
I have my buddy Master Tisfatsian's a Ranger, and he said that I'm now his second favorite Cuban. I don't know what that means.
Okay, let me explain to you what happened in that series, what you missed and what you did not care about, because it included Dusty Baker doing something I have never seen, which is he was ejected and simply refused to leave, and everyone in baseball looked at each other and was like, well, what do we do if this is the case? Because no one ever refuses.
That's a great move.
Like what do you do? He refused to leave.
And not in disguise like Bobby Valentine.
No, he's just standing in the dugout, but they're trying to
icing the pitcher.
But not only icing the pitcher, successfully icing the pitcher, because Altuve hits the home run. This was after Garcia had been plunked on purpose because he's too showy in a playoff game, or it looked like he was plunked on purpose. Mm-hmm. The Astros claim he wasn't. Dusty Baker refused to leave the field because he's saying he wasn't.
Does it look like he's too showy, or is he too showy?
I mean, he's about as swaggering, as arrogant, and on home runs as anyone.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, he is that showy,
right.
And he creates unrest. But again,
probably deserved it.
15 RBI in that series, though. 15, including all the ones in game 6 and 7 that end up deciding the series after they plunked him. He sends Dusty Baker into retirement. One of Dusty Baker's last acts is simply the anarchy of, I'm not leaving the field. You've ejected me, but I don't respect your authority to kick me out. Now what are you going to do? I would like to see that extrapolated to the end, where you have a near 80-year-old man being taken off physically by security, in a baseball uniform.
A couple more baseball questions that I have. Has Bruce Bochy's head gotten any bigger?
I mean, it's always leading the league in surface area. There is no one. I thought Clint Hurdle made a run at him for a while, but
has anyone? This may be a really dumb question, because I there was a time where I was deeply passionate about baseball, and you'd assume that I might know the answer to this. How often has someone taken 3 different baseball teams to the World Series?
Well, it's not just that. Dombrowski's a legitimate Hall of Famer. He's the Phillies. No, he didn't. He's not getting there, but he was right there to getting the Phillies.
He's with the Phillies?
He constructed the Phillies.
He knows how to spend money.
Yes. Well, I mean, not a lot of people spend money.
Yeah.
And
when I was weighing like what I wanted, and you know what won out, which was me being right always. But it's like it's like, okay, well, if I'm not right, and Mike Schur and Dan get to be cocky baseball guys, even though I made them sweat, which was pretty good, a win in its own right. The fact that I can make fun of David Samson for 2 teams that spend close to $2 billion to get to the World Series was also appealing to me. So I was in a proverbial no-lose situation.
You have to give the audience the segment somewhere. You have to, even if it's
YouTube exclusive.
Even if you have
Danny,
to.
let's put that as a YouTube exclusive with like a subtitle. This was recorded when the Phillies were up 2-0, and Dan and Mike repeatedly turned down warnings from Mike because they thought they knew so much.
The context is Mike told us right before we started talking.
And don't talk baseball.
This needs to hold for a week, 1 week. You never do that.
I specifically said don't talk baseball.
In the history of the show, we have never done that, where something needs to hold for a week.
Yeah. No way I watch this World Series now. Unless you and Mike Schur do something arrogant. Which he's in tomorrow, so probably.
Okay, well, we have to figure out something to do, because Chris Mad Dog Russo threatened to retire the moment that Arizona won the series, and now he says it's just from radio, and now he says it's not at all.
Yeah, Howard Stern's making him dress up in a bikini, I think. Ooh, can you do that?
I will do that. I will do that.